First of all, this evening, we have got Jess Farr. Jess Farr is looking after overall communications and network development within the network weaving team with Transition Together. She's also working with groups and networks right across the central belt of England. Jess, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Phil, and welcome everybody. It's really nice to see everyone here. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be doing this evening. We're a smallish group, so I think that's really good because it means we can have quite a lot of conversations and questions and discussion. We never seem to have enough time to do that. As Phil mentioned, oh yeah, thanks, that's my slide up. I'm Jess. I work for the Transition Together team, specifically as a network weaver. So that involves going around the country alongside several other people, not these guys behind me, I'll explain them in a minute, talking to groups around the country. And as Phil just mentioned, I work from Bristol all the way through to Norwich. It's quite a big area. And in my other life, I also work for Transition Stroud in Gloucestershire. So I'm the coordinator there, and part of my role there is to support a small network in the region of Stroud of about 15 climate action groups. So I've got that sort of hat on this evening as well. The people behind me are actually part of a community energy network that I'm also part of in the Stroud district. And that was a really recent photo of us visiting one of our fellow transition groups down in Thornbury, nearer to Bristol, at one of their big events. And it was kind of like networking in action. So I was quite keen to put that photo in. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about Transition Together, the network weaving project, and what we hope to achieve. And then we're going to hear from some proper experts in the field. So this is Catherine and Mariam from CAG Oxfordshire, if you want to do a wave, as well as Anna McIver from Transition Cambridge, but also the Resilience Web, if you want to do a little wave. So I'll give a little overview now, and then we'll jump straight into Catherine and Mariam, who are co-presenting this evening. We'll have questions for them afterwards. We'll hear from Anna and the Resilience Web and Transition Cambridge perspective, questions for Anna, and then we will have time afterwards for open reflection and discussion. That's all right. Max, are you okay to do my slides for me? Thank you. So I've already explained a little bit about me. If you wouldn't mind pinging on my slides, thank you. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to point out that we are in fact already in a network. We're all, as in our groups, part of the Transition Network, which is an international network spanning across 50 countries with thousands of different groups around the world. The Transition Network is an international charity and it supports all of our groups. And I'm sure each of us have had some contact with the Transition Network at some point in our group's formation or development, either through the resources, there's lots of books, etc., or simply the ideas or the initial spark of inspiration that caused your group to set up. So we've all touched the Transition Network, but it is an international organisation, and what it lacks is the capacity to give us direct support, on the ground support, because it has that overarching vision and aim and capacity, frankly. So normally in the other countries around the world that have transition groups, there are national hubs that do a lot of that supportive work with groups like ours. We don't have that in Wales and England, or indeed Northern Ireland. Scotland's okay, they have a national hub, and there is a hub in London now as well, and I think always has been on and off for a number of years. But it feels a little bit like a missing layer of support for our group sometimes. And that's where the next thing comes in, which is Transition Together, if you want to ping the slides on. I'm going through this now because I must confess, I've been involved with transition for a while, and I've been working for Transition Stroud for a few years now, and I wasn't entirely clear on the relationship between Transition Network and Transition Together and my own group, and indeed my own climate action network. So I'm just spelling it out here because sometimes I just find it really useful to review this. So what is Transition Together? It's a project team. It's not its own organisation, but it effectively does an awful lot of the kind of work that a national hub would normally do. So it helps our groups to connect and learn from each other. And it does this through sharing inspiring stories about what we've all been getting up to. It helps us with funding. I know Transition Stroud certainly benefited from seed funding, and I'm sure some of your groups have benefited as well. It also runs Vive. I hope everybody here is on Vive as a way of helping us to connect laterally with each other, as well as and I know the Transition Network itself runs a groups website where we can all contact each other and find each other on that as well. And I hope we're all there too. And it also has been running workshops, events and trainings, both online and in person over the last couple of years. So what else does it do? I'm just going to pop onto the next slide. So that's me again. Because at the minute, Transition Together is a project team, it can do a lot of the supportive work that a hub can do. But what it can't really do is truly represent democratically or transparently the groups around Wales and England. It can support them, but it doesn't currently have a mechanism to engage. So we can't become members of Transition Together, and there's no mechanism for influencing its strategic direction at the moment. And this is something that Transition Together has been working to change. And one of the ways that it's been doing this is by forming the network weaving team. So that's myself, Joe in the bottom, Rich, who's here tonight. Thank you, Rich. Phil, and also Laura, who is working with groups around the Southwest. And we've just recruited 2 more people, Rakesh and Hilary, because we were finding, unsurprisingly, that trying to span the whole of England and Wales was a bit of a push. So we now have 2 more people looking into groups in the South East and London. And if you haven't been contacted to date, that's why. So they've just come on board and they'll be outreaching to you very shortly. So between us, what we're doing is we're going out to all the groups we can, all the groups that are responding, and talking to them about what they need from us, what they would like for the direction of transition around Wales and England, how well connected they feel to us, and just generally getting a sense on the ground of whether there's potential to work more collaboratively together in future and form a common vision. This is we're in the middle of this project at the moment, so we're still asking the questions, and these events are part of that questioning phase that we're in. We found out a huge amount so far, but not enough to draw any conclusions yet, I would think it's safe to say. And what I should say as well is these events and the stuff that we're doing in terms of going out to all the different groups are just the start of that conversation, and we'll be continuing that conversation about what groups want, whether there's capacity or interest to work more closely together at the regional, interregional and national levels at the Assembly in February. So if you're not already signed up to that, please do come, because it will be a very important space for holding those conversations and questions. So that's a little introduction to us. Before we crack on, I just want to give a tiny little example of my background in Transition Stroud, because there's some learning that I've found to be really useful, and it offered some questions about the way that I'm approaching my network weaving. And they're questions that I thought I would raise tonight and particularly direct at the speakers as well. So part of my job, so when I'm not being a network weaver, I work for Transition Stroud, and part of that role is to support the CAN Forum in Stroud District. That's the Climate Action Network, Stroud District. There's about 15 of us. None of them are transition registered apart from Transition Stroud itself. And they've been pretty active for quite a few years. And the reason I wanted to raise this is because I took it on 2.5 years ago. It was handed over to me, and it was a pretty active informal network. It was well supported through the district council at the time, because they recognised that it was really valuable to have a network of community activists pulling together, supporting each other and offering support to new communities who wanted to come in, take action, but weren't quite sure how to do it. So this was great. It was handed over to me, and the person who set it up promptly retired. Wonderful. If we roll on half a year later, I had a very worrying moment. I realised that people just weren't really engaging much. Traditionally, we'd had quarterly meetings, we had lots of information exchange, we had a little Facebook group, all those sorts of things. And engagement was just dropping, like quite markedly. And I started panicking, as you would, especially coming new into the role. You know, I consulted with our directors. We came up with lots of different strategies to try and re-engage people. None of them worked. And in a moment of, frankly, desperation, I went back to the founder, the lovely retired founder, and said, please, we're going to need some help here. And he said, the answer is really simple. When we originally started, we had shared projects, and we don't have shared projects anymore. We're just all doing our own thing. We had a great flurry of activity in the beginning, and then we all became independent and we stopped working together. And I thought, oh, okay, thank you. And I went back to the directors and we came up with a plan, which was to come up with some initial projects that would necessitate collaboration in order to work. Our first one was called Green Scene. I popped it down there. It's just an online calendar for the whole of the district, because it was really bugging me that groups were not really coordinating events and activities and projects around each other. So we thought, well, how can we make that easier? So it was just a listing website. It's done reasonably well. And we've just handed this over to the organisation we collaborated with to build this, actually, because they want to take it on and they want to expand it further across the whole of Gloucestershire. So that's really good news. Okay, so we got a bit more confidence. Then we set up something called Pedal Power. We've actually just rebranded it as Pedal Power, but it was e-bike loan scheme. Now, this is a truly collaborative project that we reached out to lots of different Climate Action Network forum members and said, we would like you to host an e-bike in your community. And the people who stepped forward became our official community partners to deliver it. It's actually doing brilliantly. We're really, really pleased with that. And in fact, we got some seed funding to part fund that through Transition Together. Thank you very much. And now we're across 4 locations around our district, and we're about to move into 5. It's been wonderful. We've generated so many new volunteers through this. And again, it's just cemented the idea that we need community projects to move us forward as a network, really. And I've just put a few more things that's just snowballed from there. So now we have one of the other original forum members suggested we have a community energy network. Fine, we set that up. We've been facilitating that now for about nearly a year. It's going strength to strength. We're so happy. Someone who isn't part of the forum approached us and asked if we could host a citizens assembly project. We said yes, wonderful, for the whole district. They were like, yes, you're in, wonderful. And then finally, that picture of the woman with the exploding head is one of our images for another collaborative project that, again, we got seed funding to help run, which was a networking event initiative for the whole district. And we worked with about 13 organisations to make that happen. And I guess what I'm trying to say is we've gone from feeling very wobbly indeed, and me just constantly pushing and worrying away. And now I'm chasing. There's a lot of intergroup communication that wasn't really there before. People are planning amongst themselves. Luckily, they're still including me. That's good. But I don't feel like a pinch point anymore, and I don't feel like I'm forcing it all the time. And I guess the question I'm bringing essentially to this group in this space and to our speakers, is this the kind of thing we need on an interregional and national scale in order to cement what is technically already a network, but sometimes doesn't always feel like we're communicating between and across our regions and our groups in the way that you would expect a network to do? So that's an open question. I don't have the answer, but it's just my own learnings from my own little district in Gloucestershire. And I'm thinking, is it possible? Is it plausible? Would there be capacity? And do we need to start small and grow larger? Or are we thinking big? If we want a network, does it have to be national from the off? I think we found out an awful lot in our network weaving. And one of the things that we found so far have been that there are a lot of transition groups and other regional groups are already stepping into that regional organisational space. And in fact, we're about to listen to CAG Oxfordshire, who are, thriving, long-established regional networking organisation, and I think we've probably all got a lot to learn from them. So I'm just going to hand over now to Catherine and Mariam, and I'd love to hear everything you've got to say about your experience with regional organising, and see if we can work together in future. So over to you, Mariam and Catherine.
Great, thanks, Jess, and yeah, thanks for that introduction. I'll introduce myself quickly and then let Mariam introduce herself. So I am Catherine, I'm the director of CAG Oxfordshire.
I'm Mariam, I'm a network support coordinator. It's a mouthful, but we're gonna break up what that means in the presentation.
So Community Action Groups Oxfordshire, or we call ourselves CAG for short. There's probably a better, flashier name somewhere waiting for us, but we haven't found it yet. So we have been around for more than 20 years. We are a network of more than 100 community groups across the county who are mostly working on some sort of climate action, environmental project, but also increasingly we're moving towards thinking about intersectionality and climate justice and what that looks like. But first and foremost, is sort of a commitment to the planet and the people in that planet. So we actually started as a project of a consultancy firm based in Bristol called Resource Futures, and it was really focused on waste management at the time. And the idea was that, yeah, again, just fostering that community action at the local level. What could, in this case, Resource Futures do to try and encourage more of that action? Over time, the sort of focus areas within communities expanded, and I'll get to that because I think that is a really important piece in terms of the success of the network. So Mariam and I will kind of walk you through where we started. So a bit like what Jess was saying, groups who were there, but not necessarily working together, then perhaps some connections. And then I think it is quite a thriving network at the moment. And we have other people coming to us to sort of ask about our model. And we're also able to connect there are actually two other CAG projects, CAG Devon and CAG Somerset, which are still both run out of Resource Futures, but with other movements and networks as well. So just kind of a snapshot. So in that 20-year trajectory, the number of groups in the network has definitely grown, and we have more groups joining. And I think one of the things that we'll try and talk about a bit tonight is sort of why are people joining the network? Because sort of financially, you don't really get a lot out of us. We have a few small grants that we offer, but there's not like a financial incentive to join the network. So why do people join the network? You can see sort of, so we are countywide, which I think we do a lot of what Transition Together does, but sort of on that hyper local basis within the county. And I do think that parameter is helpful to people in terms of making relationships and collaborating. It just sort of gives them a base. So we're across the county where there are 4 districts in the city. A third of groups are in the city, which isn't that surprising, but the rest fairly distributed across the county, villages, market towns, sort of a mix all over. And then again, these are the kind of high level areas of impact that groups are working on, which you all will be very familiar with, running sort of similar projects or having similar focus in your own groups. And so one of the things, to spoil my own slide later on, is I think one of the reasons that the network has thrived is we've allowed sort of our kind of unofficial motto is to go where the energy is. So what individuals and groups, community members, volunteers are passionate about, that's what we want to support, again, under that kind of climate action, climate justice umbrella. If you go to our website, we have this nice little diagram that spells out exactly kind of how we went from project to where we are now, which I'll get to again in a bit. But so Mariam and I are going to walk you through sort of, I would say, 4 things that I think are key to the network. And again, there's some of the things that Jess mentioned already. And then, yeah, so the first one being communication. So Transition Together obviously has the Vive platform. Miriam will get to have collaborate groups, but we have our newsletters, which when we ask the network, what's the sort of most value you get out of being a member, the newsletters come up time and time again as one of the top things. We're able to share stories, we share job postings, we share funding, we share projects that are coming up. But again, it's just a way to do that. So one newsletter is focused, anyone sort of in the county can sign up for it. And we often have partners coming up to me and they'll just like randomly say, I love the key, I read it all the time. It's very short, which I think is helpful, very digestible. And at least the key in the network update, which is just specific to network members, have consistently sort of 50% open click rates, which I think is quite strong. I'm not actually sure what the replenished click rate is, or open rate, excuse me, which is a project which has a newsletter that's focused on reducing food waste. But again, that sort of feeling of kind of like you constantly kind of hear from us, if you will, in the form of a newsletter. And then the other thing is our websites. So we host events, which I know someone shared their own event calendar earlier. We have one specific that's just for repair cafes. We have different resources that you can find on our website. We have what we call district fact sheets, so you can kind of see at a glance what other groups are in your area, what kind of projects they might be working on. It's also very useful for district staff or district counselors who might want to know what groups are in their districts. So again, just ways to highlight what's going on, promote what's going on. We're very active on social media as well, sharing those things. And so again, that communication piece is an important piece for us. Miriam?
There we go. Yeah, so one of the key things we do is collaborate groups and collaborate events. So they're basically opportunities for CAGs working on similar projects across a common theme to meet up and share and find ways of working together. The meetings are open to CAG members as well as like associated like-minded organizations and groups. We also moderate a themed mailing list for CAGs to communicate with each other between meetings, which are quite good and I think they're well used in terms of people looking for things. They'll put it in the mailing list and someone will know the answer. Yeah, and the meetings are kind of an important chance for CAGs to discover more about other group activities and achievements, share knowledge and skills, explore like collaborate projects and funding bids, and kind of just network and socialize and problem solve, really. Staff support. Sorry, my computer's a bit laggy because of the room I'm in. Anyway, yeah, so our core work as an organization is to provide free day-to-day support to the network members, and that can include like advice and expertise and mentoring to help set up and maintain groups, develop projects, events, activities. We help with training, skill sharing and networking events and opportunities. We can assist with finding suitable insurance cover, offering financial support to cover insurance costs for low-income groups. There's also, we can help with access to CAG funding for special projects and supports like sourcing external funds for larger projects. We also can help with press and media communications and coordination through, as Catherine mentioned, the Key newsletter, and we have multiple social media kind of channels as well. Yeah, and just like generally signposting and facilitating connections between groups and organizations, like for advice and partnership building. Yeah. Yeah, I think Catherine mentioned the kind of, we started off as a climate action group, but more and more we're kind of recognizing that climate change and social justice are closely linked, and addressing both this essential for a more sustainable and equitable future. So we've been really pleased and excited to broaden our range of groups and to welcome some like key figures for social justice in Oxfordshire. And I personally really hope that this will create more collaboration with the groups that have been traditionally more focused on climate issues, and create a bit more solidarity within those communities. Here are some of the wonderful groups.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you look again at the history of the organization, these groups have all joined within the last year and a half. Some even joining even within the last week. So I think as we look at the trajectory of the network, intentionally sort of making that effort. And again, I think as Miriam said, hoping and putting effort and resource into collaborations between different groups, different organizations. So, and I think, so this next bit, I think what Jess was mentioning in terms of governance, and I think our governance structure is actually one of the things that makes our network thrive. So we, in 2019, transitioned out of Resource Futures as a project and became our own community benefit society. And this was for a number of reasons. But I think what that has importantly done is allow, so members pay a £1 nominal fee to join the network. They have an application. It goes through that process, but they're then buying into the network in that sense. Our board members are elected from membership, or the majority are. We have an annual AGM, which we also use as a social. When we redid our strategic plan a year and a half ago, we had several sort of workshops with the network, so that they get to have input into the organization's vision, mission, where are we going strategically. That was the first time that we articulated the intersection of, as Miriam said, climate and social justice as a priority for the organization, and got member buy-in into that. And so I do think that governance piece is an important reason why the network has that people feel a part of that network. This is just a snapshot of what the network has accomplished over, this was our last project year, so 200,000 volunteer hours across, I think, 200,000 volunteer hours across 22,000 volunteers, more than 8,000 activities across the county, reaching 120,000 participants, sort of members of the general public. True to our waste reduction roots, we're able to capture some of what is not going into incineration in the case of Oxfordshire. And then I think the other thing that I would be remiss in not saying is, in terms of why our network thrives, is that at several points along the way of our history, people have had to advocate and champion for the network, for the organization, to become its own. And the County Council has been an amazing partner in that effort. We receive core funding from them, and we have for a number of years. So sort of looking to the future, I think us being able to help them achieve their goals in terms of community engagement. And when you look across, they have, I think, 9 corporate priorities, and in some way the CAG network is contributing to that, to those different priorities. And so I think that has been huge, and I cannot pretend that that hasn't been instrumental in the success of the network from the beginning. But then also the ability to partner with organizations, both as peer and thought partners, but also in running things like, co-facilitating some of the Collaborate groups, going in on joint funding bids together, that kind of thing. Strengths, Miriam?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate that we have got really positive brand image, so groups want to be associated with us. which is really, really nice. And then that draws in more people, which kind of adds to this collective pool of knowledge sharing, collaboration and resource sharing. And I say we're fortunate, but actually a lot of it comes from a really good and consistent communication, maintaining contacts with groups and individuals and groups so they know we're always here to support them, share advice and resources, whether that's like, sometimes it's just going over to the group site and meeting them up for a cup of tea, just touching base. They don't even necessarily need help, they just want to see a face, a friendly face. Or that could be like providing more like physical tools like PAT testers, so groups kind of really know they don't have to feel alone, and that really helps with building trust, which is, I think, is one of our greatest strengths. Yeah, and with the challenges, I think we just face a lot of the challenges that a lot of groups in our situation do. For instance, the networks is largely like dependent on volunteers, which comes with the challenges that any kind of volunteer-led network has. But also there's the benefits as well of working with volunteers. Also, we can't be everywhere all at once, so we do depend quite heavily on online meetings and events, which is never quite the same as in person. But again, that like does allow for more people to join in and be heard, and there's more voices. So all of the kind of challenges have benefits, really. And I think with the ebbs and flows of energy and the demographics, they do come back to that issue, the issues that come with being volunteer-led. But we're trying and like hoping to get more young volunteers involved, as well as creating spaces through training for our network where minoritized people can feel more welcome and kind of safe in the spaces that the groups provide.
Great. And I'll try and wrap it up quickly. So none of this won't be things that you haven't already thought about with your own groups, or if you're thinking about networks, but sort of our advice or our lessons learned, I would say, over the past 20 some years. Miriam mentioned it a lot, that building trust and being responsive to the groups, meeting people where they are. So understanding kind of where they are in their group development, as well as the physical, as Miriam said, meeting them where they are. I think the more that we get out and meet people, it creates the relationships, which then on the back end, sort of thinking organizationally, creates accountability in some ways. So when we go to collect all of those stats at the end of the year, people feel a greater sense of responsibility to help demonstrate the power of the network, which obviously helps us kind of keep going as a network. I mentioned it at the beginning, going where the energy is. So if groups are really passionate about food surplus distribution, trying to figure out ways to support that. If they're really passionate about active travel, figuring out ways to say yes to that. Understanding what potential members' sticking points or barriers might be, you know, and that might be the best opportunities for collaboration with other groups, or the best value that you can add in supporting a network. Again, mentioning that practical and emotional support, that mix. The communications, and then the being creative and the thinking intersectionally. And I think there are so, you know, so I think our stat was that we reached 100,000 people last year, or the network did, through events, but there's 700,000 residents in Oxfordshire. So the more that we're able to collaborate with other groups who are reaching other people, the more sort of, that's when you really get to see the power of the network and what you're able to achieve. I think that's it. So just thanks for listening to us.
Thank you. And yeah, there's a lot of familiar stuff in there, but it's so impressive what you've managed to achieve at scale. It's wonderful. I have had a couple of questions, and I'll try and make it really quick because I know we're a bit over time. So there've been a couple of questions about, you use the term intersectionality a lot, and I know it was addressed in the chat, but maybe if you're Catherine or Marion would like to explain that term a little for those that asked.
Sure. So thinking about issues of, let's say, like you have a mother who's worried about how she's going to feed her child. So she's not necessarily thinking about recycling and what goes in what bin. So we need to figure out ways to address her sort of primary needs so that she can hopefully be thinking about environmental or other sorts of things that may still benefit her life if she's able to take those actions. But that sort of thinking beyond just, we need to get this mom to recycle or compost her food scraps or whatever it is, but actually, how do we address her primary need? Another example might be low traffic neighborhoods have been quite contentious in Oxford. But if we're able to say, and there's lots of good reasons for, both sides of the argument, but if we're actually able to work with some groups who work with communities that don't necessarily have access to private cars or don't have access even to be able to afford bus fares all the time or train fares, cycling schemes and getting them bikes and things like that, that then, you're able to bring these two things together where we give them a carbon neutral way to get around, but also sort of addressing the issue of how they just get around, how they commute, how they get their kids to school, that kind of thing. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I thought that was a perfect example. Lovely, thank you. I've got another question, and then we'll move on to Anna, if that's all right. So someone has asked, what do you think is uniquely special and particularly effective about working at the county scale?
I think it's just I think villages and towns are a nice unit of change. And you'll hear in my accent, I'm American. And I think moving to England, the village unit is a nice, unit of change. And then I think at the county level, it's almost, you're sort of working from the same shared understanding or background of what that scale is, how the government is set up, how the local authorities are set up. And just a sort of like a sense of belonging to Oxfordshire that then I think enables collaboration. And we didn't mention it in the weaknesses, but as I think more about it and thinking about those regional connections, that's maybe a weakness or a challenge, is we haven't always reached out across the county borders. Some local groups may, where they are right on the edge. But that is potentially an area where we could be stronger at breaking down the silo of the county. But in this particular case, it has worked for us, I think, again, in that shared sense of place to then collaborate.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess perhaps we can talk later about other ways we can create a home or a sense of place in people on a wider scale with luck. I'm just going to pass over to Anna now, who's going to talk about what Transition Cambridge is doing in terms of networks.
I think there's quite a lot in common and very inspiring to hear what you're up to. So yeah, I'm chair of Transition Cambridge. I'm also one of the directors of Resilience Web. And I won't say more now because you'll see during my presentation what those organisations are and what we do. It's a bit different. Transition Cambridge is just Transition Cambridge. We don't reach, well, actually that's an interesting point. So although we call ourselves Transition Cambridge, we certainly extend our activities into the villages around, but not in a formal way as CAG does. Nevertheless, we engage with networks in various ways. So that's what I'm going to talk about here. And then Resilience Web is a way of visualizing some of those networks. So yeah, just to say that's what I hope to talk about. So I'm just going to share my screen. I thought I would talk about our experiences of networks, the benefits and the challenges, as well as my Transition Cambridge and Resilience Web hat. I'm also a Work the Reconnects facilitator and originally an aquatic ecologist, and with quite a lot of other roles in other communities which are also network-like. So I suppose I'm bringing reflections from several different communities. Yeah, so in particular, I'm going to think about how Transition Cambridge and Resilience Web support networks. I want to show you the Resilience Web network mapping tool. I think that's why I'm invited here tonight. Talk about some of the benefits, some of the challenges. Also think about the different levels that networks work on. And consider how networks support larger goals that maybe individual groups struggle with. So Transition Cambridge, we came into being in 2007. The idea and vision came from Rob Hopkins. About 3 members from our group attended the Big Green Gathering, saw Rob Hopkins give us a talk, and were inspired to bring together a group of people in Cambridge. That group of people actually came entirely from 2 other groups, pretty much, from Five Rhythms Dancing and Cambridge Carbon Footprint, which was an existing group doing something not dissimilar to what Transition Cambridge does. The how to get started came from some, I think, instructions that Rob Hopkins had given about having meals and really starting on the level of friendship. And I think we were quite lucky that the people who came right at the beginning had really wide range of skills and experience, from coaching to interfaith ministry to facilitation. And so I think we came with quite a strong starting point. So we had our first internal meeting in 2007 and our first public meeting in 2008. So at this point, the Transition Network was really important in terms of getting us started. We used the books to guide us what to do. We showed the transition films to try and to get those first events going. We invited transition speakers, Rob Hopkins, Sophie Banks. We had the training in Cambridge, and we attended the transition conferences. And without a doubt, at the beginning, being part of that network allowed us to start. And I really don't think we would have got anywhere without that being there. So I feel like the input from being part of a wider network at the beginning was absolutely core to us coming into existence. Our early attempts at building networks. So I think, like many new groups, we had this vision that we were the next best thing, you know, that we were going to build this wonderful network in Cambridge and that everyone would want to be part of it and that we would, you know, change the world quickly. And like lots of groups, we quickly discovered that things, for a start, existing groups were not very impressed about another group coming up and taking up a bit of the space. They definitely valued their autonomy and had no intention of being part of something else. However, we continued because we had quite a distinct vision in, you know, the transition vision of being more positive, less doom and gloom. We quickly came up with some policies to sort of reflect that we were going to only work in that way of being more positive. We agreed early on that we would never campaign against or protest, but always build something. And that it was about building more positive and effective alternatives that would be inspiring and motivational. So we kind of obviously had to find our own niche within that existing ecosystem of Cambridge groups. We actually were able to build a presence quite quickly. Firstly, I think because there was a lot of national coverage of Transition Networks activities at that time. So people were coming looking for us. Also, we set up a newsletter very, very early on, which went out, say, every week or every 2 weeks with a listing of interesting things in Cambridge, not just ours. And that quickly, I mean, that took off really quickly. People were interested. People wanted their events to be advertised because they knew it went to a lot of people. So actually, I think we were quite lucky to build that space within and sort of kind of to help with networks in as much as we were one of the conduits of information of benefit to all the groups in Cambridge. I think our learning from those difficulties with the other groups at the beginning was that networks have to add value to members without requiring much input. Community groups are all mostly run by volunteers. They're usually already working at their limit of available time and energy, and anything which requires time and energy from them probably isn't going to happen unless it's of benefit to them. So when they can see that you're going, by putting their event into your newsletter, which might take them 10 or 20 minutes, but if they know it goes out to 2,000 people, they'll bother to do it. So there's got to be a benefit if they're going to put some input. And I think, you know, we understood that quite quickly. We grew very quickly at the beginning and immediately very quickly had meetings with the city council, with various councillors. So quite quickly we were able to sort of key into the larger networks of Cambridge. So, sorry, this is a bit annoying that this, there we are. So Transition Cambridge now is thriving. We're fairly self-sufficient. For quite a long time, we haven't really had a lot of input from the network. We probably haven't really felt the need for much input from the network. We still do feel ourselves part of the network, and that is definitely facilitated by things like this, by regional gatherings, by the newsletter. And I think we're still very grateful to be part of that network. I don't think we would want to be standalone. So I think it still has value to us, even though we don't actually have much engagement with it. Mostly, just like in Oxford, we follow the ideas and energy of people who are in our group, generated here. We like to hear what people are doing elsewhere, but really, because we're all volunteers, we can only do what people want to do. If they don't want to do it, it's not going to happen. One of the things we work with a lot in Transition Cambridge, and actually I should just say that Transition Cambridge, I wonder if I've got a slide coming up soon. Here we are. So Transition Cambridge is kind of a network of projects. Like this is sort of organized into sectors, and then around that are the actual projects that we have. And each project runs essentially autonomously, with one person coming and representing that project at core meetings from time to time. So although we have core meetings about every 3 weeks, probably, I mean, people come, about 3 or 4 of us turn up regularly, and the rest from time to time, but that's enough. I think people want to be part of Transition Cambridge, and groups choose to remain part of Transition Cambridge because there's a really steady flow of mutual benefit between the groups, the projects, and the middle. I'm just going to go back to the slide before. So we work with various models in terms of how we think about what we do. One of the ideas we have in Transition Cambridge is the idea of budding off. I've shown you a picture of Hydra at the bottom, being an aquatic ecologist. So the idea is that an organism grows, and then when it has enough resources, maybe a smaller organism forms at the side and eventually buds off and becomes its own thing. And that's very, very much the story of what's happened in Cambridge. Loads of projects have budded off from us. Some of them have grown really big and have forgotten their roots, and we don't mind at all. We're just delighted that our existence has enabled the existence of lots of other groups to happen. And some of those groups have come and gone, and some of them have got big, and some of them have won awards. And actually, what's also happened is that some groups have asked to become part of Transition Cambridge because they can see the benefit of the affiliation. So we're quite flexible in groups coming and going. You know, what serves the group, we're willing to just flow with that. So yes, it's a sort of a less connected network in some respects. Another thing we do lots of with Transition Cambridge is partnership working. And in a minute, I'm just going to go through some of our projects and talk about how that works. And I think something really important to say is that a lot of the sort of the maintenance of the network between groups in Cambridge is via friendships and via people who are in more than one group. So they wear different hats at different times. And because of that, there's this sort of flow of information of what's happening. And someone may say this is happening, and it helps with collaborations. And so I feel like those two things support a very informal network of a lot of the groups in Cambridge. So I'm just going to show some slides of some of the things we do. So for example, repair cafes. So there's actually the Cambridgeshire Repair Cafe Network now. There's probably about 2, 3, 4 repair cafes happening every week in the villages and in Cambridge. This is a collaboration with Cambridge Carbon Footprint. Apparently, I like to hear this, apparently I was the one who came across the idea of repair cafes and brought it to Cambridge, so it's nice to know that that happened. But so initially it was just a partnership with Cambridge Carbon Footprint, and actually now Cambridge Carbon Footprint have a paid person supporting the Repair Cafe network. So we're sort of the smaller partner. And actually most of those repair cafes are organised by local groups, and the network provides resources to them. But we have a toolkit that was offered by a local business, and we lend that out to groups if they want it. We also provide help with booking, with monitoring numbers of repairs. there's something called the Fixometer, which helps you see how much carbon was saved. So that's a network that we helped set up, and actually is not really run by us at all anymore, but we're really happy to see it thriving. Cambridge Sustainable Food. So this was something that we helped found. We used to have a food group, it doesn't exist anymore, but when it did exist, it helped found Cambridge Sustainable Food. This is now a thriving organisation which we have almost nothing to do with. Until recently, we had someone who attended their board meetings, but I think even that has stopped now. They are doing really well. They have paid people. Cambridge recently won a gold Sustainable Places Food Award. Anyway, it's just lovely to see. This is something that budded out of Transition Cambridge and is really, really thriving. A much more recent group that has come out of Transition Cambridge is Water Sensitive Cambridge. So with this group, we were able to sort of host them while they wanted to apply for grants. They couldn't do that without having an organisation to enable them to do that. So they could use our bank account, they could use our insurance, they could use quite a lot of the things that we just have for all our groups. They were able to use that while they set themselves up as a CIC, while they got much bigger grants, and now they're their own organisation. So also, this is just to show the types of events we run. So in this case, this was an event that Water Sensitive Cambridge ran with University of Cambridge, with a University of Cambridge project called Crash, and with various local people doing different things. So again, example of collaborative partnership working, and how we support groups to bud off and become their own thing. The Resilience Web project is another such project, which I'm going to talk about a lot more later, so I won't say too much now. It's a mapping project for networks, essentially. Another project which is part of Transition Cambridge is Empty Common Community Garden. This is run by Charlotte, you can see in the middle here. This actually started as its own project, and at some point Charlotte said, please can we be part of Transition Cambridge? And we were delighted to say yes, because it's an amazing project. And so I'd say it's become one of our core projects. It's now pretty much all our meetings take place in this garden. Yeah, a lot of our socials take place here. We feel we're really pleased to be working in partnership with Charlotte on this garden. This is just to show you the Empty Common Community Garden hut, which is a really rather fabulous creation, which was helped fund, well, Transition Together helped fund this, so thank you very much. And then this is another project which I think started out as part of Transition, and then it budded off for a while, and then it came back again. So just again about how networks work. So here are some thoughts on networks, and just having looked at some of this. So, I mean, networks are obviously made of nodes and links. And I was just sort of thinking about our experience of what passes along these links. And these were the ideas that came to me. First of all, information in the form of stories, experience and learning, such as advice on setting up or how to manage conflicts. Material benefits. For example, Empty Common Community Garden provides physical space. Money, grants, like our existence enables people to apply for these things. We share our insurance with all the groups that form part of us, and that means they don't have to pay for it themselves and they couldn't afford it. And also we provide a lot of advertising, so anyone who becomes part of Transition Cambridge in fact anyone in Cambridge gets our advertising. We don't, if someone wants to be advertised in our newsletter, we just say yes, providing it's about environmental, community, local things. Something else that I think is really important in holding networks together is support, kindness, positive feedback, friendships. Just having someone to talk to when things are tricky can help groups to survive and get through quite difficult times. And the joy of those friendships, the joy of social gatherings, I feel like it gives us all energy just to keep going. That's probably covered in the next point too. Energy, knowing others are doing similar things to what we're doing, or the groups in Transition knowing that they're part of a much bigger group doing something in the same direction, helps us all to keep our energy up. And finally, this sense of being part of something bigger, a sort of sense of bigger purpose and membership, part of a community. I think those really help each of us to keep our own energy and our own vision alive. So just to show how some of those things run in Transition Cambridge, we have a fortnightly bulletin which has actually been going out since about 2008, and I think we've hardly missed any, maybe a few during COVID. So it's a little bit amazing that that's kept going. Over that time, there have probably been 10 different writers. We've changed the system a little bit here and there, but it's been very constant. And when we ask people, most people say they value our newsletter above all else. We also have a really good website. The key thing about our website is we have an events listing, which anyone can submit something to. And from that events listing, it automatically turns up in our bulletin. So if you get it in by the deadline, we will advertise your event for you. And we know that people really like that. We have a blog. We also now have a notice board right in the very middle of town. And again, we share that with anyone who wants something to be advertised there. We really see ourselves as just supporting all the groups in Cambridge that ask for our support as best we can, that is. So we also run films, talks, stalls. We get invited to do things. We try to go when we're invited. And we have lots of social events. This is something we've got a lot better at recently. And I think it's almost, that's like the beating heart of the group, is that we get together and we do nice things together. We go for walks, we have picnics, we have bonfires. And yeah, I honestly feel that without that, I'm not sure the group would last very long. It feels so important. I think I already talked about the notice board. Oh, I just wanted to mention this. So through doing Empty Common Community Garden with Charlotte, we got invited to help plant a garden of resilience right in the middle of town. And we were given the notice board for free. So that's a sort of partnership with the council through an informal friendship between Charlotte and one of the guys on the council team. And I mean, normally you have to pay, I don't know, something like £10 for an A4 poster. And so they've just given us this for free. And that's just because of the partnerships and the benefits they've had from us, that they offer it back, which is so precious to us. So just to talk a little bit now about permaculture, because I'd say that's one of the other ways that we link in to the Transition Network, is that permaculture is quite core to how transition came about with Rob Hopkins, and at different times how we've done things. So in about 2020, we had a really low period. We actually had a meeting in 2020 where we were just saying, is it time to stop? Can we keep going? There wasn't much going on. There wasn't much energy. Things were sort of falling down. And at this meeting, Meg Clark, one of our long-term members, she offered to do a permaculture design for transition. And so this is just, I don't know whether people know about permaculture. I think it comes from permanent culture. It's a design principle for sustainability. It's often applied to gardens, but it's actually for anything that you wish to design sustainably. And so Meg did this permaculture design on Transition Cambridge. She interviewed lots of us. She interviewed lots of other people around in Cambridge. And then she presented it back at our next AGM. And one of the things that was really, really inspiring was she created this diagram here, which shows connections. Actually, just before that, I wanted to mention something about networks being like webs, and really thinking about, one of the things about permaculture is taking inspiration from nature. So the wisdom of the spider, the master of the web. And as I was thinking about this, really noticing that the spider has always got its feet on its web. It's really feeling, it's observing, it's so aware of all these connections all the time. And that enables it to respond very, very quickly, to mend the web. It recycles old threads. I thought there was a lot to think about from spiders about how to build webs that last and that are strong. Anyway, so Meg created this design, and I just wanted to say, something that she told us from this. She was concerned about the apparent lack of connection between members of Transition Cambridge and the wider ecosystem of groups in Cambridge. But when she looked beneath the surface, showed that Transition Cambridge was connected in many ways to many other projects and organisations. In fact, Transition Cambridge was seen to be the birthplace of many of the projects, and to have a valuable role in community life through its regular newsletters, which list all progressive environmental events. She drew the web to show how many points of connection Transition Cambridge had with other local progressive groups and how embedded it was in the community. She wanted it to be inspiring and graphically show the power of Transition Cambridge in community resilience and regeneration. So at the meeting, this diagram really caught people's attention. And actually, it almost felt like the diagram in the presentation reinvigorated Transition Cambridge. And instead of asking the question, is it time to stop? We were like, right, let's start again. It was amazing, the influence of one little diagram. So that was sort of the rebirth of Transition Cambridge. But also, everyone was like, this is so amazing. Please, can someone digitize it? So we put a little note in our newsletter, could someone digitize this? And we got offers. Dinah Ishmael offered to digitize it. We discovered someone else was building something similar for the university. We started working together and Cambridge Resilience Web was born. So the Resilience Web project is essentially a mapping of networks. In this case, we started with Cambridge. Cambridge, like Oxford, I suspect, has a lot of groups. For quite a small city, we're only about 100,000 people. I think we have more groups than some quite bigger places, chances are. And it was really amazing to see them all laid out in this way, and also to create a directory showing them. So the Resilience Web is both the mapping of it and a directory. And just to give you a brief look at how it works, at the moment there's about 8 places. There are more in the pipeline. It's essentially a web platform that's available to anyone to use. Any city, any town, any village can adopt this to map the organisations in their area. Our vision is that it should be used to map climate change, environmental, sustainability and social justice related groups. So very similar to the network that you've described in Oxford. It's designed to be very easy to input your group. The organisations are organised by a category and by a tag. The category forms the nub here, so they're, for example, food or energy or community gardens. And then the tag allows us to identify groups by function. For example, sorry, this just shows you some pictures of how it all works, but I'll skip those. Just to say it's very easy to create the web and it's very easy to add groups. We've spent quite a lot of time making it simple to use. But a recent tag that we've created is called A Penny Saved. And what Helen did here was she went through all the groups in the web, there are 200 or 300, and she pulled out groups that were of benefit to people wanting to save money. So they could be in financial straits, or they may, just want to save money in whatever way. And then by clicking on that tag, the web gets reduced down just to those groups. And obviously that creates new routes for advertising the web, and we hope a sort of new level of usefulness to the web, but also addresses more social justice aspects than just so it's a completely new thing. We haven't really launched it yet, but we're hoping that this will enable more people to engage with the web. We're also creating webs around other topic areas, like this is the water web, which is about groups working on water, sort of in the Cambridge area. There's seem to be about 30 or 40 already, and the idea is that it will help some of those groups to work more collaboratively. So this is a tool to encourage collaboration, and to help networks build, but the intention is not to build the network. It's about allowing people to see what's out there. So it's a little bit different than, it's not about building networks, it's about demonstrating networks, I think you could say. So here we are, the purpose. So yes, it's a visualization of networks. It's to help people find groups they're interested in, to support people to volunteer, to enable groups to connect up with other similar groups, to help us all feel part of a bigger movement, to maybe look at gaps. Once you've got them visualized, you can see which bits are not being worked on. We hope that it will facilitate groups in a particular place coming together, but we're not aiming to provide a leadership role. Perhaps we've understood that most groups in Cambridge don't really want us to provide that. So, but maybe that's just specific to here, I can't say. And of course, the point is that building a larger movement can hopefully bring about larger scale change. And as you know, when you see them all together, hopefully that helps everyone to feel part of a larger movement and might help that larger movement to appear. Just to show you that Resilience Web ran, we did a community day, which had the purpose of gap filling and maybe starting projects for areas that weren't being addressed in Cambridge. That was, I think that was last year that we did that. Lots of people came, but I'm not really sure that many new projects formed. So to some extent, it was a learning for us. Just to say, this platform is free. If anyone's interested, please get in touch. And special thanks again to Transition Together for supporting this through the funding. So I'm right near the end, because I'm probably near the end of my time, I think. So reasons for building networks. Well, obviously, the idea, I think, is that larger groupings are more effective agents of change, given where we're all headed in trying to create a better world. And I love this quote that Rob Hopkins often uses, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Coalitions and movements can affect change more quickly, but they can also get very bogged down in procedures, conflicts, and complexity. For example, at the COP meetings. So I think, yeah, it's a tricky one, how to best bring about change. Here are just a few slides showing some of the ways that the internal network of Transition Cambridge works. We made this visualization last year, and I suppose it's interesting because in the middle you see all the administrative support that we provide, and then around the edge you see the groups that we offer that to. And it's a lot, you know, there's a lot that goes on in the middle in order to enable all the ones on the out. So the groups, they don't have to worry about all this. We just do it for them. And then they can get on with what they care about, which seems to be working well for us. I've shown you this already and mentioned about people wearing many hats. Also, this is sort of looking at where we fit. So, you know, we have about 60 volunteers who organize all the transition projects and activities. We have maybe 1,500 people who look at our media and so on, and some of them attend the events. And then we have the entire area of Cambridge that we perceive ourselves as serving, whether or not they want to be engaged. And then, of course, we have links wider, the UK community, the global community. Cambridge and Oxford both, we're quite well placed for that because we have this steady stream of academics arriving and leaving to take ideas around the world. And then, of course, Transition Together, Transition Network as our way of keying into the wider transition community. One of the things to mention is this thing about everyone deciding that networks are a good idea. These are all the networks that appear in Cambridge, which we're all invited to. And frankly, it's overwhelming, and I don't go to hardly any of them. The Climate Leaders Network, the Making Connections events, the local Climate Change Forum, Cambridge Council Voluntary Service, People Planet Planked. Do you see what I mean? So I feel this question of how to provide benefits from the network to the groups is such an important question, because just turning up at meeting after meeting where everyone's like, isn't it good to get together? Well, actually, it takes time and energy, and I could be doing other things. So things that we've appreciated from Transition Together, the grants. The newsletter is really good, and we really enjoy gatherings. I think not that many of us go, but we really enjoy these face-to-face gatherings so that we can talk to each other and feel part of this bigger movement. A few ideas. Well, certainly for me, I'd love to be more connected with other initiatives, maybe by WhatsApp group or something quite informal and regular. I suppose an idea for what a network could help us do would be to engage at larger scales nationally. E.g. with the media or lobbying, etc. Personally, I enjoy face-to-face meetings. I'm not that keen on Zoom. And I feel the current system is working reasonably okay because we're quite independent and we enjoy being part of transition. So thank you. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was a real whiz through. I hope other people here who are not yet aware of the Resilience Web are interested in it now, because I'm certainly going to try and do that in Stroud and indeed for Transition Together more widely as well. So we're working on that together at the moment. I've got lots of questions from the chat. I'm really super aware we've only got 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. So I'm going to go with the questions that I've got from the chat. But if you have more, please put them in. And if we go over time, what we'll probably do is gather those questions and put them to the speakers after and get back to you so that we keep it respectful of everyone's time here, if that's all right. So we had a question which I think both our speakers can probably respond to. And I think Catherine's already started responding about what the difference is between a network, a forum, and a partnership. I think that was from Kathy, about whether we how we differentiate between those terms or whether it's useful to. So I don't know if Anna would like to respond first, because I think Kathy's already responded in chat.
I would say partnerships tend to be smaller than networks. Networks, in my mind, are inclusive within a boundary defined by the topic. I'm not sure there would be that much difference with forums. Maybe a forum in my mind is more an event, but I think it's a bit interchangeable, my opinion.
Yeah, and I just threw in the chat, I think of, again, when I'm thinking about partners, more of a one-on-one sort of connection with sort of like-minded groups within a sector, or perhaps cross-sector, but a similar ability to engage in terms of resources and time, is kind of how I would think about that. And then forum, I guess I would think about as a space in which networks or partners could come together.
That answers your question, Kathy? Yeah, brilliant. We'll try and whiz through all of them. So we had one from Phil about this idea that Transition Cambridge helped groups through tough times. He had a question about whether that involved supporting through conflict, and that's something that you feel that is part of your role.
Yes, I feel very much it's part of my role. Yes. I cannot tell you how many conflicts there have been over the years. And I mean, yes, often, but very, my style is very informal conflict resolution, talking to each person, trying to find ways through. That's just been how I've done it. I know there are probably better ways and more formal ways of doing it, but yes, very much.
Is that accord with your experience, Catherine?
Yeah, we don't, we haven't had lots of experience with that within the network. Certainly groups have experience with conflict and needing to resolve conflict resolution. And we're actually getting ready to, or in the process of planning a training on conflict resolution for groups to attend. So that's the kind of offer that we would provide, is to come and sort of talk about that. And I can share if we get the booking link for that on the next couple days, we could share that with this group. But yeah, so I guess it's more at the group level, and we try and support them through those processes.
Thanks. And then actually, it probably is quite related. Another question from Kathy about how you respectively manage things like governance, insurance, that you touched on it. But I think it's specifically around those groups that pop in and out and how you manage that. Is it formal, informal? What are the legal aspects around that, or the governance issues? And that was specifically to, I think.
To me, was it? Okay. So we have a definition of membership as someone who volunteers. So the moment you touch the ground doing something for Transition Cambridge, you're automatically a volunteer. And as a volunteer, you're then automatically covered by our insurance. We keep a register of volunteers because we have to have that for our AGM. But as long as we know that you've turned up, then you're covered. So, and we don't, I mean, realistically in a year, we probably 60, 80 volunteers, and our insurance covers up to 100. So it did come up recently, actually, that some people were trying to claim projects were part of Transition Cambridge that we'd never heard of. And obviously we have to draw some lines, like if we haven't said you're part of Transition Cambridge, there's no communication to that, then you're not, okay? You have to ask us. It doesn't just happen automatically. But on average, if you ask us, we will go out of our way to try and include you.
Yeah, that's interesting. On me specifically, but that's something I can identify from the position, the CAN forum. We have groups who have similar, we have particular processes around onboarding with insurance, we have affiliate agreements, these sorts of things that they're negotiable because we're friendly, but they are there. Yeah. And how about you, Catherine?
So member groups are their own sort of either incorporated or unincorporated groups who will have their own insurance policy. Part of our agreement with the county council with our funding is some of that is ring fenced for, I think Mariam mentioned groups who have qualified as sort of low income. They can apply for us. If they evidence their insurance policy, we can either cover all or some portion of that through these grants. So we sort of, it's on the groups to organize their insurance, but then we can help cover their costs.
That's interesting. That's a different model. So it just shows that there are different ways of doing this. Yeah. Thanks. I'm going to whiz on because we do have a couple more questions and it'd be great to get through them. We have a question from Rich about scale on Resilience Web. So how to scale to cover in Peterton and their associated community groups. I believe there is already a start on that. Is that right, Anna?
Yeah, Southwest London has already got a Resilience Web. So, but the person who set that up, because again, Resilience Web runs by local groups just deciding they want it. We don't control it that much. And the person who set that up has set slightly different boundaries as to who can be included. So, which actually reduces the number of groups and makes it more manageable. I think, I actually can't remember, but she doesn't just include any group that exists. It's got to have certain things. And that means that she hasn't got a vast number of groups. I think I would say that it would be very difficult to scale it up to the entirety of London if you included every group you could find. But that wouldn't be desirable, really, because the whole point is that you can see groups in an area that you might want to reach. So it would probably make far more sense to do it by borough or, you know, so a manageable scale for people to travel between or, you know, whatever. For example, actually in Cambridge. So in Cambridge, an area which we've defined as being about 10 kilometres outside, the village is in that. We know that most of those people would happily come in and out of Cambridge to do things. A lot of villages are now saying we'd like to have a Cambridgeshire Resilience Web, and we will probably make one. And then some places like Peterborough and Cambridge will have their own webs, and there'll just be a link to those places from the bigger web. So that's our idea at the moment, but we are exploring how to do it. There are no answers. It's collaborative. Ideas very welcome.
Thank you for speaking to that, Anna. And finally, I feel like it's a really good question to close on. Another one from Rich, I believe. Is there value, do you think, at the nation scale of a transition network? That is to say, a network of only registered transition groups. And this is coming from the perspective of both of you talking about the diversity of groups in your networks. And that's something that I can speak to as well from my experience in Stroud District. So is there value, do you think, in having only registered transition groups in a national network? Maybe start with Catherine.
I mean, I definitely think shared identity is important in trying to activate a group of people or a group of groups, if you will. And at least that shared identity to start with, and then obviously you could kind of branch out from there. And I think that's kind of what the CAG network did, is, you know, shared identity around, again, mostly environmental climate projects, or even starting just with waste projects, but then allowing that to evolve over time. But I think starting with that sort of shared identity, you then have common language that you can use, and again, just yeah, a sort of foundation from then which to move on from. But that's just my thoughts.
Thoughts welcome, definitely. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Anna.
I also think there's value because I think transition has its own niche. Like there are loads and loads of groups and a lot of them are quite similar, but I still, for me anyway, the transition brand still has value in my opinion, because it is different from XR, it is different from Just Stop Oil, and actually I think there's a lot of value to a more positive approach and a less confrontatory approach than some of these other groups.
If I'm really super aware of the time. If anyone has any burning questions they would like to ask before we close, please, now's your moment. So just open the floor, and if not, then I'll hand back over to Phil to close us out. Thanks everybody for your time and participation, and we will be sharing this video more widely as well.
Thank you so much, Jess. Wow, that was a really, really, really rich and interesting conversation. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, all of the questions as well. And thank you to everyone for your engagement this evening. I hope that this has sparked some really good discussions and thoughts about how your group could work in a more collaborative way going forward. We would love to see you at future events as well as the assembly, of course, and we will be sharing other ways of getting involved with the Network Weaving project as we continue to develop and deepen our work. If you want to carry on these conversations or ask further questions, then please direct those to our Vive group. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. You were all absolutely wonderful.